Hello everyone. In this video we're going to enhance the form that we had in tutorial number 10 I believe it was. For this video we're going to try and keep it a little bit shorter this time, and we're just going to add some dynamic form elements. So what we're going to do is we have this team drop down at the moment, which we have hard coded. So if I go and look at the source code here, it's all hard coded in this area here. And also for the past injuries, these are also hard coded. So down here, beyond position, we've got 3 here inline checkboxes that are hard coded. Now we're not going to change position, and that's because we know there's always going to be 5 positions, and that never changes in basketball. However, the amount of injuries that they might want to list on this page could increase, and also the number of teams could increase or decrease even to the point where we don't have, maybe we have 1, right? Now, I've just noticed from my previous lesson I forgot to take out the interpolation code at the top. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually leave in the injuries one, and I'm going to put in the team ID, because we're going to test later to ensure that what we've changed is going to work for those 2 fields. So we'll leave them in for the moment. Just take advantage of the fact that we had 4 there. So let's get started on this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start introducing services. Now, I'm going to spend a little bit more time on services later when we get into more networky kind of stuff, where they're kind of really utilized for that reason. But basically, to give you an idea, a service is kind of like a provider to your provider to your application that provides data to whatever you're rendering to the screen. So, for example, it could be that you're on a tables page, or a table page like the players table, for example, and we used a service to provide the data for this, right? Now, we know for a fact that we're only just mocking it, but the idea is that that would eventually become from the internet somewhere through some API or, something like that. Some local storage, maybe even on your computer, though hardly unlikely that that's going to be the case, but most likely it's going to come from an API of some sort. But that's essentially what services do. They provide a separation between you and the data that's coming in to facilitate how you're rendered. It's basically to keep a separation of concerns between what you're rendering and your data. It filters it through. But for this registration page, we need to actually provide 2 new services, and we're going to get lookup data for the teams, and we're going to get lookup data for these injuries here. So let's get started on that. So the first thing I want to do is I want to come over to one of my directories here. I want to find out where I am. And currently I'm in the main root of the app. I want to go into the app folder. And here I want to go, I'm going to be putting all this stuff in shared. These providers are going to sit the shared library. So in here, what I'm going to actually do is I'm going to make a new directory, and I'm going to call it lookup, like so. So now we've got a new folder called Lookup. Now I'm going to create 2 services right now, and one of them is going to be a injury lookup service, and the other one will be a team lookup service. So let's do that. Ng, G, we can use service here. We're going to go injury dash lookup, and remember we don't need the .service part because it'll be done for us. So we're going to add our first lookup service. In fact, I've just put this in the wrong spot. I was supposed to add this to shared lookups service. It's going to put this stuff in the wrong place. It's going to add it almost. In fact, even better, I just realized again, I always forget to do this. I have to run npm install. So that's handy for that to happen. I should always do this before I start the lesson, but silly me, I get a little bit carried away and I want to get started, and so I forget to do this every time. So sorry about that, guys. I know it's kind of something you don't want to watch because it's not really, you're not really learning anything from it. But yeah, we're going to add, so basically under this directory, we're going to have a lookup folder, and in here we're going to have all our lookup services and our mock data and any potential classes that we need for the lookups. They'll all exist in this lookup folder. So just give us a moment while that's ticking over. Still ticking, still ticking. Nearly there. Doing last minute installations. And done. Alright, I'm just going to clear the screen. So we go back to the top, we're going to go ng g service. And once again, I called it injury. No, I want to put it into shared. Oops. Shared slash lookup slash injury lookup, like so. Hopefully you can find those two directories. And service generator but not provided, must be provided and used, that's okay. And I'm going to do the same for teams. So just going to change this from teams to team, from injury to team, and add those. And same deal, it's telling me that, you know, I haven't provided that yet, so let's go and do that. So here's our lookup services. Let's go down to our shared module and we'll import the services in. So we're going to import, and by rights, because we called it injury dash lookup, it should be called injury lookup service, like so. From, and we're in the lookup folder, and it'll be injury dash lookup, I believe. Oh, sorry, dot service. Yep. And we'll do the same for team, the team one, and we'll call it, it will be called the team lookup service. And instead of saying injury here, we'll change it to team. And then we'll register these two. So injury lookup service, whoops, and team lookup service. Cool. So that's all registered. So now what we're going to do is we're going to come to injury lookup service. And in here at the moment, we don't have a lot, right? But what we're going to basically pull down is we're going to pull down an array of strings, all right? And just like we have done with the other service that we have, the REST API service, we're going to return mocks. Okay, so first thing we might do is we might mock out the injuries. So I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to call it mock dash injuries. I believe I'll call it. Dash lookup .ts, like that, and I'll do one for teams as well. Let's do that. So we go mock dash teams dash lookup .ts, and now let's actually get started first by defining our mock lookup data. So as usual, we have an export of a constant, and we're going to call it mock injury lookups, or lookup, like so. And we're just going to make it an array. And in here, I'm just going to add the same ones that are currently sitting in the registration screen. So if I come down to players, registration, and registration component, we'll scroll down a little, and we have broken foot. A little bit. Where is it? Yeah, broken foot, knee injury, ankle injury. So let's go and add those. So, and just like this, we can go broken foot, knee injury, and ankle injury. And this would normally come from a database somewhere, but for now this is all we're doing. So we're exporting that now. So now we can go to our service, our injury lookup service, and we're going to export this information. And so as a result, this is pretty simple to write. All we're going to do is we're going to import that mock that we just had. Import mock injury lookup from, and we know that it's in the same directory, so, and we called it mock injury lookup, like so. I think no, we did call it injuries, like so. And then we don't necessarily need a constructor at this point, we just need a method. We're going to call this method, let's call it get injuries lookup. Sounds pretty straightforward. It's just a string array, so we'll specify a string array. And we're going to return mock injury lookup. That's it for that particular lookup service. Not much else I need to write about that. Now for the teams one, it's a little bit more because for the team we want to capture, I believe, the ID and the name of a team. See, we've got the ID and we've got a name. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back up to lookup. I'm going to create another file. I'm going to call it team-lookup. Oops. Like so. And I'm going to define a class here. You can do this as a class, you can do it as, you know, maybe a tuple or something like that. I don't know if TypeScript supports tuples though, but I'm just going to do it as a class, because I'm using classes. There's no reason not to use a class. So I'm going to, at this point, I'm going to put in an ID. So we go ID, number, name, string, and I want to construct it. I like to construct these things: ID, number, name, string. And the reason why I like to do that is I like to know that I have to actually set things. This dot ID equals ID. This dot name equals name. Straightforward class, nothing special here. Alright, nothing to worry about from this point of view. However, we're going to go up to the team mocks now. So mock teams lookup. And we're going to create an array of team lookups. So, first thing we need to do is we need to import that. Import, and we just did it, team lookup from, by now you should be starting to understand these from statements as well. So // here is the current directory, or yeah, it's from the current directory of where these files are. So now I'm going to go, what is it, team lookup. Yep. And then I'm going to export another constant. We're going to call it mock team lookup, not lockup. Lookup. And again, it's an array, because that's pretty much what we do when we want to gather them all in one thing. We use an array, don't we? And then for this, I'm just going to go new team lookup, and I'm going to use the same data that's in the form, so I know for a fact they're in alphabetical order. So I'm going to go Atlanta Hawks. I'm going to copy and paste this 4 more times. Actually, before I do that, I should put the comma at the end. 1, 2, 3, 4. The last comma, and we'll go 2, 3, 4, 5, And we'll change these. So it's now Boston Celtics. This is the Charlotte Hornets. Oops, I spelt it wrong. It's 1T. 2 T's for Charlotte, 1 T for Hornets. Chicago Bulls. Whoops, went too far. And Cleveland Cavaliers, the champs. And I hope they knock out the Warriors again this year. Though I will say I'm actually heading off to Oakland in mid-January to go watch Cleveland and Golden State. I think it's January 16 or something they play each other. It's basically they play each other on Christmas Day and then they go and play each other in January, and I will be there for the game in January. And they were not cheap to get those seats, I can tell you that now. I spent a lot of money, more money than I probably would normally like to. But anyway, it's a one-off, and it's a big clash between two NBA Finals teams, so I'm going to love it. So, moving on, I don't want to talk about basketball all that lot. I can. Clearly I'm working in this area. But now we've explored the lookup as the data for the lookup. Now we need to go into the service. I should close these. These are already done. They're kind of just getting in the way a little bit. And leave that one open. But we need to come down to the service, team lookup service. And this is very, very similar to the other one. Except we just need to import two things this time. So I'm going to import the team lookup first from, you said it, team-lookup. And then we need to import the mock team lookup, I think I called it. Lookup from, in a minute, mock team lookup. Did not call it that, did I? Teams. Okay, mock teams lookup. And I did call it that. Right, so similar to before, we're going to get rid of the constructor, we don't need it. So we're just going to expose one function, get teams lookup. And this could have all been done. We could have used an interface to make sure that this abides by an interface. But again, this is more of an object-oriented thing. I'm not going to be focusing too much on object-oriented programming at this point. But normally, if I was spending a little bit more time on this, I would see that these services, or these lookup services, have similar behavior. They got one method and they're returning some kind of a lookup object. But I digress at this point. They're different enough to not require an interface. One's an object, the other one's returning an array of strings. So they're different enough to not require having to be so finicky with that. And in this case, we're just going to return mock team lookup, like so. And now we've got our two services. Now these two services need to be utilized by what? Yep, you guessed it, the registration component. Because that's where the data is. So, with that in mind, we're going to close the form for the moment. We're going to come over to the registration component. And now we need to, I just noticed that I have a semicolon there. We need to come in here and we need to initialize the data for this component. Now, I'm still not going to spend too much time explaining this on init because I'm going to have a video about all the life cycle of both components and directives. But I want to get through components and directives before I get to that. And probably I'll go through that before I get into more networking because we're actually fetching real data from a real server. Because they kind of all tie in together. But for now, I'm just doing this because this is just usually the practice you take when you inject services and you get data from services. You'll usually use this on init, which you implement like so, like that, and then the registration component wants an ng on init method, so you give it what it wants. Alright, so you go ng on init, like so, and the error goes away. So what we need to do is we need to actually bring in those two lookup services now, so that we can actually look up the data and actually push it out to our form to create dynamic information. So let's do that. So the first thing we need to do is we need to import them. So let's import. We're going to import the what do we call it? What did we call it? Just trying to think off the top of my head here. What did I call it? What did I call it? What did I call it? I could just go look, but I'm not going to. And I called it the injury lookup service and the team lookup service. So, in fact, I was just referring to some of my notes instead of looking at the code and yes, I do have notes on the side just in case I get massively break everything. You know, I can go back and you might say, oh, that's cheating, it's not really teaching. Well, guess what? In real life, people have notes, people make mistakes, and I don't want to spend like an hour trying to fix everything. This stuff I have done on my own, so there's nothing that there's nothing to complain about because I have actually worked on this. So I need to go up two directories, and for the most part, I don't even look at the notes. It's only when I get a little lost that I check it. Anyway, we're going to go up two directories. So it gets us up from where we are, registration, players, up to the main app. We come down to shared, and we go into lookup, and we're pulling out the injury lookup .service file, just like that. And we're going to do the same for teams. So we're going to have team lookup service, and this will be team. Now we also need to import the array for teams as well, the team lookup object, sorry. And we'll see in a minute why we need to do that. So I'm going to put it up here. So we go team lookup from, and again, we know it's in the same location, so we can just do this quickly. Team dash lookup, like so. Now, for the form to work, what we're going to do is we're going to create two more properties here that are kind of outside. We could put them as part of the registration view model. However, they're more lookup information. They're not really data that will be passed off to another service or anything like that. That's why we've got this view model. This view model is capturing the data that we want to populate and that we need. So that's why I put it in the view model. However, I think the lookup data should be in separate properties of their own. So I'm going to create a team lookup list, right? Which will be basically a team lookup array, the same as what's coming out from the service. And then I've also got an injury lookup list, which is a string array, like so. There's a little bit more to it, but at this point, that's what I've got. So now what I want to do is I want to actually set these values. So to do that, first we need to inject the actual services. So let's do that. So private, I'm going to call it injury lookup service. Oops. And again, if you don't remember, all services are constructor injected. So you have to do it this way. And that's an injury lookup service, like so. And then another one, we're going to have team lookup service, and that's a team lookup service. Cool. Now we have our services, we have our properties we want to bind to, so now we need to join them together. Now, normally these services could be performing HTTP calls, and some kind of network call, some TCP connection needs to be established, so on and so forth. And it's recommended that you do this generally in NG on Init. Now, for us, we're not actually making any network calls. However, I just like to do this for good practice, so that I don't forget of where I'm going to put the information. So, because we're using simple services, I'm just going to place or basically extract the information here. We could do this in the constructor, but I just think it's good practice to leave it where it should always belong. So this .team lookup list. Right, so now we want to assign this information. We're going to assign it to the team lookup service dot. This team lookup service dot, and we want get teams lookup. Right, that's it. That's all we need to do for that one. And we're going to do the exact same for the injury list. So we go this dot injury lookup list equals this dot injury lookup service. I'll just type the whole thing. Dot get injuries lookup. Right, and that's that one established. Right. So now we're in a good position. We've created our services. We've registered those services. We've created mock data, or mock data, as I would say in Australia. Again, I've been listening to too many American videos. It's mock data here. We've done that. We've grabbed the service that we needed. We've assigned it, or we've injected it into our component. We've created a couple of properties for our component to get the information from the service so that we can bind it to our component, the HTML part of our component. So now what we need to do is we need to go to our HTML and we need to basically clean up what's going on in there, right? And I think potentially, if I've done this right, we could still load the page, but nothing's going to have changed yet. So I'm just going to quickly refresh here, and we can see the page still loads. And so far, the teams are still hard coded, so they're still there. And these are still here as well. So what I'm going to do now, just to prove to you that what we do is going to work, I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to remove all of that. And I'm also going to remove two of these. Right? And I'll explain why I don't remove them all for a minute. It's basically for template reasons. I want to be able to reuse this for our template for the checkboxes. But now if I go over and have a look, and I refresh again, come in, I've just got a please select, so there's nothing else there, and we've got one broken foot checkbox. Alright? So let's bind these things now. We're gonna create dynamic options in here, and we're gonna create dynamic checkboxes here. So let's start off with the drop down, because the drop down is actually the easiest one to do right now. So we'll start with the easiest option. So we're gonna come up to the drop down, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna create another option. So we go option, right? And for the first time, I might sit here and explain this a little bit, but we've got this ng4, right, directive. I was going to explain this later when I went through I think there's 4 different directives that exist in Angular that are built in. This is one of them. And basically what this is, it's like the old ng repeat in the first Angular, and it's not double star, so you know. So the star here says it's basically a declarative. I think it's a standard directive in Angular 2. It's kind of like one of the built-in ones. And what it does, we say ng4 is like, give me the line that indicates we're going to iterate over something. So we start off with a let. So we're going to let this item be something or be an individual item of a particular list, right? So for the fact that we're building the select option screen off teams, what we're going to do is we're actually selecting an individual team, right, from this team lookup list, right? So it's an individual lookup from this team lookup list. So now we're going to reference this team for the rest of this option, right? So next we've done that. So now what we want to do is we want to bind the value. So again, attribute binding. This is something you've already seen, and we're going to bind it to the team's ID. Remember our lookup class had an ID property? Well, that's where we're going to use it. We're going to use it for the value of this option, and ultimately, whatever option we choose, the value will be populated into this team ID field up here, which is part of the registration view model, right? Now, we're going to close that. We're going to create a closing option as well. And then inside the option, we're going to put the text, right? So again, we have interpolation, and we're going to go team.name and save, right? And that's it. So a very simple way of iterating over an array and not having to define like 50 potential options. You specify it once, and then we use this ng4 construct to iterate over a list, and it will generate the option for us with a value of the individual team for each option's ID and their name. So you'll see in a minute, we should get the same information we just did before we remove this information. You know, the first time when we removed the hard-coded stuff. So let's have a look. And if we come over to team and we click it, again, it's back. Now, if I choose one of these, like Boston, and I come up to the top here, we see the number 2, right? And that's because at the top, we wanted to confirm the team ID was different. So if I come down and I pick Cleveland, this is probably going to be 5, yep. Atlanta should be 1, and Charlotte's 3, you know, so on and so forth. So we can see now that that's actually working. So I'm going to take out this line now because we don't need it anymore. Right? Now comes the more tricky part, because what we're trying to establish now is an array of checkboxes where the value fits into one property of the view model. Right? So normally with a checkbox, you either click on it to go true or false. It might flag a property on the component to true or false. But for this particular example, we're not doing that. We're taking whatever the value of the checkbox is and we're adding it to an array, all right? But we also have an array that generates a dynamic set of checkboxes here. So like it's an array that produces the output and then it's stored in an array. So it's going to be, it's a little bit complicated when we talk about generating the right markup and then generating the right value. Now, we've already covered in the previous video how we can check the things are already chosen and things like that. Now, I actually found a bug in this code. This code is not actually perfect. And the reason why it's not perfect is simply because that should be 1. Right, so we're only grabbing 1. However, I refined this even more so when I looked at it, because this whole confirm injury not already chosen, it's just a little bit too much and it's a little bit error prone, so I'm going to delete it, right? So what I did instead, which I think it's probably a little bit more legacy driven, but I think it works better overall, if I can find it, is basically I'm going to just see if there's an index of the value. So we can go var index of entry, because in this case we are case sensitive. I'm not going to be worried about too lowercase and all that stuff that we had before. Index of entry, and we're going to go is equal to this dot registration view model dot injuries dot index of. So this is all basic JavaScript stuff. Index of value, right? And then what I said is if the index of entry here is less than 0, so in other words, it didn't find it, we're going to push it, right? Otherwise, we don't need that anymore. And I'm just going to push in index of entry. So we're going to pull out the one that we found, right? And then we're only going to make sure that's the... So for splice, what we're actually doing, right, and this is the case in JavaScript as well, when we call the method splice and we pass it an index, we're basically grabbing a subset of what is inside the current array, and we're creating a new array, but we're also removing that array data from the current array. I hope that makes sense. And basically, when we specify an index, like we'll say this is like 3, right? We're saying starting from index 3, if we didn't have this here, starting from index 3, go get everything after from 3 onwards, right? When I add this, I'm saying get me 3, and because I only want to get one item, don't pursue any further. If I was to put 2 here, it would say go get me number 3 and 4. Okay, if there's a 4. And that's what it would do. So this is actually more reliable. After having a bit of a play the other day, I realized that it wasn't, the code that I'd written wasn't perfect. This is a lot neater. Also, I hate the fact that I put that there. For C#, that's how I do it. For JavaScript, I've always put the parentheses like that. That's just a taste thing, but still, it just gets on my nerves when I don't see that working right. So, moving on. What I want to do now is I want to hook up this lookup list, which we're going to come down and similar to what we've done for the drop down, we're going to go to the label. Okay, this is not the input, because we want to reproduce this label over and over and over for each one. So we come here, we go ng4, right? ng4 equals let, and we're going to say injury of, and what did I call the name of the property? Injury lookup list. Injury lookup list. And what we really need to do is we just need to bind to the value and change the name. So we've got the value here, like so. Instead of having the word broken foot there, we just put the word injury, because now we're grabbing the text that's in the array and we're putting it into the value. And then on top of that, we want to come down to here, instead of having it like that, again, interpolation, and we go injury, like so. And if I refresh this, we've got our stuff back, right? However, have you noticed there's a problem? Maybe you haven't. It's not obvious that there's a problem. And the reason is because these labels encapsulate the thing. But if I click on this, it still works. But technically, if you go and look at the HTML markup for this, right, you'll see something very peculiar about it. So if I come into label, we've got form check inline, that's the class. We go inside the label, and we've got this ID broken foot and name broken foot, right? But for the next one, we also have the ID broken foot and name broken foot, and we have the injury, and for this one we also have ID broken foot, name broken foot. Right? We don't want that, and the reason why we don't want that is because it's not really good HTML practice to have it, especially with ID. Right? You can only really have one ID on a page per thing. Right? Once you've used that ID, you shouldn't be using it again. But at the moment, the way we've written this, because we're using an NG4 and it's just iterating over what we've typed, it's just using what's hard coded there. So we need to address this as well. Now, it's not the easiest thing to address, but in saying that, this is what happens when you try to create dynamic checkboxes, which Yeah, I'm giving you probably the more complicated option here. Like generally, people will just say add three checkboxes and all three will represent something. But because ours is kind of like a list of injuries, so it's all kind of related to each other. They are related, so they all go into the one container, but they're also very different. So we have to make sure our IDs and names are unique. So let's go about doing that. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to come back over to our component, and up here I'm going to create a new injury field list. Right. And it's also going to be string array and things like that. And basically what we need to do is when we're initializing this injury lookup list, just after it, what I want to do is I want to initialize, initialize, I can't spell, it's S here, initialize field list, or we'll go injury field list, injury field list. See, this is when I'm not reading my material, and I'm just trying to remember. And we're going to create a new method for this. So down under here, I'm going to private, like so. And the first thing we need to do is we need to instantiate this list, because at the moment it's undefined. And because this is all happening under ng on init, we can just do this once, like so. And forgot to use this part, we must use this. And then what we want to do is we want to have unique names and IDs for these fields. And basically what I was thinking was, when I did this, was that we have the injury name. What we have though is we have a spaces, and we have capital letters and things like that, but we don't really want to have that. Okay, we don't particularly want to focus on having big words or whatever for our IDs and names. So what I thought to do was this. We have this injury field list, but we're just going to basically pull out what is in the injury lookup list and basically shape the text. So we're going to have a for statement here. We're going to have let injury in, and this is the same as, not in, of. I keep forgetting it's of in TypeScript. My bad. This dot injury lookup list. Whoops. Injury lookup list. So we're going through the lookup list, and what we're going to do is we're going to go this dot injury field list dot push, right? And we're going to push the injury value. But first, before we do that, we're going to trim it. So just in case they have spaces on the ends, we're going to get rid of them. We're going to replace any spaces inside of it with nothing. And then finally, we're going to go to lowercase. And that should hopefully be enough. We probably need to do a little bit more refinement there. I'm pretty sure you can't have IDs with hyphens in it and all that kind of stuff. But for just this example, I'm just going to keep it that simple. If you ever run into a situation where you need to do this, and the text can be anything, you'll have to think of a better way of giving a nice clean name to your labels, to your IDs and names. But this is the way I've chosen to do it for now. So this will now give us a list or an array of information that we can use as we iterate over the lookup list. We can then match up the indexes for this and get the right value. You'll see what I mean in a minute when I do it. So let's go back out to registration component. And the other thing you can do with ng4 is you can actually specify more than one kind of iteration. So for each iteration, we got injury inside of that list, but then we can also specify, let I equals this index, and index is basically 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, so on and so forth, like an index of an array. This is brought to you by default by ng4. So ng4 has a built-in thing where you can get the index, and this is how you obtain it. So I've set it to something called I. So what I can do now is I can come in and I can go to where the ID is here. And instead of having the word broken foot, I can go, what was the name of the lookup? Injury field list. I can go in here, injury field list I, like so. That's for the ID. Same for the name. Right, and that should, by rights, give us unique IDs and names for these inputs. And it will also help us out with, it might potentially help us out with validation in the next video too. But for now, I'm just going to show you how to apply to this. So let's go over and have a look at our document. So coming down, we'll get our broken foot. Let's inspect that. And now we can see down here, and in fact it still hasn't worked. I'm not sure why that didn't work. Where's the ID? The ID is unique. I think what I forgot to do is I forgot to put this in parentheses, which I have. So see again, attribute binding, must put it inside parentheses. Square parentheses, that is. So it should open up again now, and the name shouldn't be injury list I, it should say broken foot. It decides it wants to load again, which I might have to do manually. So now we come down, we look at the input here. We've got ID broken foot. We've got name is also equal to broken foot. We come down to the next label. We've got the same input. We look at the ID. We've got knee injury, all lowercase. And the name is also called knee injury. And finally, the idea of this one is ankle injury, and then name is also ankle injury. So now we've got unique unique field IDs for these things. I click on the label, it clicks only that one. If we go and we look at how it's binding at the top, we can see the injury is currently selected, but choose broken foot as well, and come back up. We've got knee injury, broken foot. If I uncheck knee injury, we should just have broken foot. Now I'll check ankle injury, and we got broken foot, ankle injury, and knee injury. We have all three. Remove broken foot, and so on and so forth. So it's still all working as intended. Okay? And I'm going to leave it there for this video. And in the next video, what I'm going to start working on is something that you guys might have been waiting for, and that's validation. So we're going to start validating these fields and specifying lengths, and things have got to be required, and adding messages, for when, certain things aren't done, that kind of thing. We're going to do that in the next video. So very exciting. I know this one wasn't as interesting. Hopefully not as long as the last one. The last one was pretty long. This one was just to demonstrate how you can build dynamic forms from data from basically a database or from an API somewhere. Anyway, thank you everyone for listening, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye for now.